mountains hide many a dark secret. Some you don't want to discover.
I never told this story to anyone until now. I stay in an area of North Carolina that, back in the early 1800s, had the biggest sawmill in the United States at the time. The town of Elizabethtown now sits on the grounds of that sawmill. To the north is Bladen Lake State Forest. There's a creek there called Turnbull Creek, named after the Indian chief that laid claim to the land there. My grandfather told me Chief Turnbull struck a deal with the sawmill and allowed them to cut the trees except in one area where many of their ancestors were laid to rest. The story goes that the loggers began cutting, and for years no problem had ever came between the loggers and the tribe, until the day they cut on the sacred land. A battle broke out, and in the end the tribe was slaughtered, all except the chief. It was said he cursed the land and swore to protect it forever. It was said he changed into a black smoke, as dark as coal, and in it was two bright red eyes like fire. A story when told in detail would scare any kid from venturing off into those woods, except me and my then best friend. In my younger years, I loved to explore, so naturally those woods made a great place to have adventures and discovery. The creek always gave relief from the hot summer days. The cool water fed by springs that was so cold that in the heat it would give you goosebumps. I used to think there was gold in that water, for the glittery flakes you would find all over your skin after a dip in the tea-colored waters. You always had to be careful of where you took a swim because cottonmouths, water moccasins and rattlesnakes enjoyed its banks. The forest around was loaded with wildlife. Deer, black bear, raccoons and squirrels could all be seen around on a daily basis. Sometimes, if you were lucky, you would find an arrowhead or a railroad spike from the old logging rail that went down the side of the creek. The old dirt road to the creek was a good hour walk from the neighborhood. I remember one spot on that road was always cold, even in the summer. So cold, in fact, we would run as fast as we could to get through it. Sometimes, it felt like the temperature would drop from 99 to 50 degrees right there. Eventually I got curious as to why. Maybe it was another creek that nobody knew about, or a pond filled with fish, or maybe something else. Whatever it was, I was going to find out. One June, me and my best friend set out to find out. My grandfather told us not to. He told me the story of Chief Turnbull. I wrote it off as an old tale to scare kids and set off for the woods anyway. I never believed ghost stories. This one wasn't going to scare me either. I told my best friend to be prepared for him to try and scare us, and off we went. I remember walking forever through those woods and never finding anything. So we decided to follow the cold air and see where it went. After some time passed, we came up on a thick area in the woods. Thorny vines and thick underbrush was everywhere. The cold air was coming from the inside of this thicket. We found what we thought was a deer trail, and crawling on our hands and knees we made our way through. It felt like 100 feet we crawled before everything cleared. No trees, no brush, just tall grass and mounds of dirt scattered about, and the air was freezing cold. The whole clearing was surrounded by the thicket like a ring. The air was misty, like a light morning fog. In the middle of the clearing was what looked like a smoke from a campfire. It was a dark smoke, and in it was what looked like a person standing there. All I could see is the outline of a body, but when it turned around I saw the eyes, bright red, like fire. It moved towards us, quicker than we could react. When we did react, we moved like lightning had struck us on the feet. I never knew a person could run on all fours, but we did that day. Right back through the thicket, so fast it seemed like a flash. behind us, we could hear something stomping through the woods, like a charging bear, and people whispering in our ears. We made it out the thicket and never stopped running. We ran until the air warmed up and we couldn't breathe enough air in. I think it stopped chasing us long before we stopped because we didn't hear it anymore. But why not be a little safe and make sure? When we made it out of the woods, it was starting to get dark. No words spoken on that walk home, just two kids trying to make sense of what happened in our heads. We walked by his house first, then mine was a block away. I had to walk past my grandfather's house to get home. He was sitting on the front porch when I walked by. He asked me if we found what we were looking for, and I told him yes. He asked if I wanted to show him, with a smile in which I replied no. The next day I went back to my grandfather's house. He told me how he did the same thing when he was little, how he saw the clearing and the mounds. He said it chased him out of there too.
Them woods hide many dark secret, and that was just one of them,
I remember him saying. My best friend and I drifted apart after that. He never spoke to me about it, and I never spoke about it to him. He's now the chief of police in a town close by, and I work for an engineering firm building roads and bridges. My stepson came to me not long ago and asked if we could ride that road one night and spotlight deer. I told him, go if you want to, but I wouldn't. Them woods hide many a dark secret. Some you don't want to discover. Sometimes I ride by that dirt road. Sometimes I will look down it. Sometimes I see a smoky figure standing there with glowing red eyes looking back at me. When I do, I know Chief Turnbull is still there, and he's still protecting the sacred lands. He won't have to protect them from me though. I'll never go back. If you listen to my prior story, called The Red Eyes, you will recall my grandfather telling me them woods hide many dark secret. This is another one. It was also a story covered by Monster Quest a few years ago. So, if you want to watch what started it all, I recommend you go watch it first. I'm going to tell you a story told to me that happened only a few months ago. In the town of Bladenboro, just 8 miles southwest of Elizabethtown, where I stay, it was said a demon cat from hell used to stalk the woods, killing livestock and making the locals scared. Then suddenly, it disappeared. That's what they say anyway. We know it didn't. To this day, there's been reports of something that looks like an abnormally large mountain lion with blood-red eyes and fur as black as night. Its cries have been compared to that of a woman being torn apart and screaming for her life. Luckily, it only has a taste for goats and cows. Or so we think anyway. I will tell you, there has been a few people that's gone missing. Some have been found, and to hear some of the police tell the story, the bodies were torn to shreds. It's not just located in Bladenboro like most think. It goes from Bladen Lakes State Forest to the Greens swamp area, which covers 3 counties and 1,225 square miles. A friend of mine was hunting one day down in the Greens swamp when it started getting dark. If you hunt this area, you know you got to be out of the woods before dark by law. So he climbed down from his tree stand and began the long walk through the swamp and underbrush to where he parked his truck. Now, my friend is a cornbread-fed southern boy and has the size to prove it, standing 6 feet 6 inches with a weight of 260 pounds of pure farm muscle. He isn't small by any standards. So he learned not to be scared of anything. He said what happened next made him never want to go in the swamp hunting again. Making his way through the brush, he said he began hearing something walking through the woods towards him. He stopped to listen for it and said it sounded like a large black bear, so he got his gun ready just in case. When he stopped, it stopped. When he walked, it walked. He said it made him nervous because whatever it was knew he was there and wasn't running off. He said he started making noise and even shot his gun in the air. It didn't leave. Instead, it let out a growl that he said you could feel as much as hear. All the way through the woods, it stayed just behind him, out of sight. When he came out of the woods, onto the dirt road, he said his truck was about 50 yards down from him. He decided it was a pretty good chance that whatever was following him was going to keep following or make a move on him there, so he took off running. It took off running too. He said it sounded like a bulldozer was crashing through the woods, and when it broke from the woods, it sounded like a horse running through loose dirt. He could hear the stomps of its feet and the growling in its breath. He didn't have to look back to know it was coming and catching up to him. He shot behind him, hoping it would scare it enough to stop a moment and give him a chance to make it to the truck. When he did, he said he must have hit it because it screamed, and for a moment he thought it was a person. That's when he finally turned around. He said it was jet black, as big as a 600-pound black bear, its tail as long as its body, and eyes that were glowing red. He hit it, and it was just standing there looking at him, as if to say, "Now you've done it." He bolted to the truck and jumped in. Just as he shut the door, he looked, and it was right there. He said it was so close its breath was fogging the window. By now, he said he was shaking bad, and it was everything he could do to get the key in the ignition and start the motor. He drives a Ford F-350 four-wheel drive that was raised up so that there's a good 2 feet of clearance under the truck. He said this thing was on all 4 feet and looking eye to eye with him in his truck. The engine started and he took off like a bat out of hell. He said it chased him as hard as it could until he picked up speed, and then it stopped and watched him drive off. The next day, he and his dad went back with guns and looked around for tracks, blood, or even a dead body. He said there was no blood, even though he knows it was shot, and there was paw prints as big as his hands on the ground everywhere. Then they found a tree that 9 feet up had claw marks, 1 inch deep in the wood, spaced 4 inches apart from each other. They didn't venture into the woods, nor did they go too far from the truck. Both of them said they felt as though they were being watched and didn't want to stick around to find out what it was. They got back in the truck, and that's when they heard it. A scream from the woods off in the distance. He said it was like a woman screaming bloody murder. It let him know it was there, waiting. Yep, there's many dark secrets in them woods. Charles Daniels even wrote about these woods in one of his songs. If you ever get adventurous and want to try your luck, come on down to Green Swamp, and when the sun goes down, get real quiet. You might hear that scream. I hope when you do, it's off in the distance and not close by. 'Cause if it is, well, it might just be the last sound you hear. Have you ever woke up in the middle of the night, and in the corner of your eye, you see someone standing there, only to find, when you look that way, there's nothing there? Chances are, there was. Here we call them people in the shadows. I was 15 the first time I saw them. In my bedroom I had this beautiful bay window that took up the whole wall. I had a view of the orchard, and just behind it at the edge of the yard was a fence that separated my yard from the state forest. For some reason, I began having issues with it though. At night I felt like I was being watched, and looking out the window you couldn't see anything but darkness. That feeling got stronger over time, so I began hanging blinds and thick curtains, so I felt a little safer. My stepdad decided to put a light outside where I could see at night through the window, and I felt a little better. That is, until one night, I saw them. It was a fall evening, and the only light you could see that was natural was the full moon overhead. The light my stepdad put up shined down on the pear trees, and I could see the edge of the yard pretty easily from my vantage point in my room. The silhouette of trees and bushes in the woods always seemed a little odd-shaped, but tonight they moved. At first I thought this isn't real, and found myself glued to the window watching. I could count 13 of them moving around. I could feel ice in my veins, like they knew I saw them. I watched almost like I wasn't able to move, like my life depended on me not even blinking or they would get me. They moved back and forth in the woods until one stepped through the fence. Yes, they walked straight through a solid object into my yard. They stood just at the edge of the light, looking back at me. They were just a black shadow, no definition of the body except the outline and the void inside of each. I couldn't tell if they were facing me or had their back to me. No eyes, no face, just a shadow standing there, like the shadow of yourself on a sunny day, but in the form of a body. I must have realized something because I quickly closed the blinds and pulled the curtains. In a panic, I don't know why I didn't go to my mum and stepdad and tell them. I just got in bed and pulled the covers over my head, wishing to wake up and they would be gone. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it, but somehow I fell asleep. I woke up sometime later and couldn't move. At the foot of my bed, I could see a figure standing there. Very short, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. It was holding my foot. To the side of the bed stood a very tall figure, hunched over in a room with an 8-foot ceiling. It placed a hand on my chest and spoke in a whisper. To this day, I don't know what it said. Not that I could understand the language it spoke, but also because it spoke in a whisper so low I couldn't hear it. The shorter figure climbed up onto my bed and scurried up, crawling to my chest like it was mad. Just as it grabbed me, they disappeared. The next morning I woke up and my chest was hurting. I told my mum about it, and to my astonishment she wrote it off like I had a nightmare. When I looked in the mirror, you could see a handprint on my chest in a light red outline. A very large outline. This happened just about every full moon until I moved away. After that first time, my chest didn't hurt, and there was never any marks on me again. I thought maybe if I tried to communicate with them, I could find out what they wanted, but every time I couldn't move, couldn't talk. Come to think of it, I don't think I was even breathing. Maybe it was just a bad dream, a nightmare that stopped the day I moved away. Sometime later, both my mum and stepdad had passed away and I had a marriage that fell apart, so I moved back into that house with my kids. My daughter got my old room, and after the first night, we put more blinds and curtains up. I hung sage and put salt down by the window, and she slept like a baby after that. She asked me why I put the salt and sage out, and I told her to keep the shadow people away. She looked at me in horror and started crying. Then she whispered to me, "So, you see them too?" I thought I was just having a nightmare. They came out of those woods, and I'm sure they are still there waiting. What they want or what they did to me, I don't know. I wish I did. I wish whatever it is, I could find it and give it to them, so maybe they will go away. The pear trees over time died over there. Nothing seems to grow but the grass. The fence is still standing, and for some reason it's rusty and brittle. The fence posts all look burned, even though there's never been a fire. We don't mess around on that side of the yard. All of us kind of feel uneasy about being there, so we let it be as much as possible. I can't say they're trying to do us harm, but I just feel uneasy, like something deep down inside me knows to be scared of them. Them woods have many a dark secret. This one isn't too dark, but if you ever come to my house, I will let you sleep in my old room. One night, when the full moon is out, you might meet one of the shadow people. Keep in mind, it might be you they are looking for though. Around here on a calm day, you might hear the guns from Fort Bragg going off. So most of us are used to hearing and feeling a bang every now and then. Sometimes though, we get an explosion that hits, and when it does, the windows will rattle and you are confronted with the thought that the end of the world just started. But when you run outside, there is nothing. No smoke, no fire, just calm. That's when you know you have been introduced to what we call the Seneca guns. It gets its name from the same sound heard around Lake Seneca, but they've been heard all around the world and has many different names. Some say it's just the military testing missiles in high atmosphere explosions, or a sonic boom from a fighter jet. Some even say it's a meteor exploding in the atmosphere. Whatever it is, it's been heard long before the settlers came here. In fact, the Native Americans said it was the sound of the thunderbird flapping its wings to take flight. Sometimes, if you're at the beach and one hits you, you might see an orange ball of light sitting just above the water soon after. Many have said to have seen it. Around here, you might see a green glowing mist coming from the woods. If you look real hard, you might see a figure in that mist, just walking around trying to find its way through the brush. This story really isn't too scary. In fact, it's more of an offer of a wonder, yet to be explained. But if you ever hear it, you might understand just how scary it is to live with it every day. There's no warning, no known trigger that causes it. It just happens. A boom so loud your very soul can feel it. A boom that some say comes from the depths of hell. Maybe it's just a weather anomaly. Maybe it's just an atmospheric disturbance. Maybe it's the devil slamming the door to hell after taking another soul. We may never know what it is. Them woods hide many a dark secret. Some we might never understand. This is a very true story. I don't know if it's a story that now has an ending or not, but this house is one I will never forget. Right beside the road sat a house, dilapidated from time, and Mother Nature had long begun her work to erase what man had built on her land. Today it's gone, burned down by some teenagers doing things they shouldn't have. But in the late 30s, the little house was the scene of a horrible crime. 2 elderly sisters called it home then. One day, in the summer, a convict that escaped from the chain gang called it a hideout from the law. He thought he was alone in the house, till he found the sisters hiding in the closet. Nobody knows why he did it, but the police described it as one of the most terrifying scenes they ever investigated. We used to call it the witch's house because you could hear the screams of the 2 sisters when you walked by. And if you read some of my other posts, then you know all about the woods that was just behind it. The newspaper described in detail the crime scene. My grandfather kept a copy of it, and I remember reading it like a Stephen King novel. The 2 women were found on the living room floor. One body was cut to pieces, with the head, arms, and legs removed from the body. The other body had been stabbed multiple times, and then cut open with the innards removed and placed beside the body. The limbs of the other body were found in the kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom, with the head found in the trash can. Blood covered everything in the house. The convict was named, as were the 2 women, but I will not use their names. The convict was found in the attic, in a panic-like state, covered in blood, and was crying about how the 2 women attacked him. His statement read, "They came at me like they were possessed, and moved faster than any human could. They were chanting in a tongue I couldn't understand, and told me I was about to be sacrificed. The convict had several stab wounds, bite marks and claw marks all over his body, and died later at the hospital of an apparent heart attack. The article went on to say that before his death, he told the police that he got away from the women and they turned on each other, and that one gutted the other before she died from her wounds. He said after that, it was quiet for a moment, so he came out, only to find the body of one still trying to move after death, and was still chanting. So he got an axe and cut her into pieces. When he removed the head, she was still chanting. To this day, there's one part of this crime that has yet to be answered. There were markings on the wall in the old lady's blood that were described as rune-like symbols. They were written with 2 fingers, and blood was found on the fingers of a severed arm that seemed to be fingers used to draw them, meaning the old lady had to write them in her and her sister's own blood. The other strange thing is that there were 5 reports that same day of convicts escaping the chain gangs, finding a house with 2 elderly women staying in them, and out of all of them, this is the only convict that seemed to survive. The others were killed by the elderly women. The summer of 1992 was the best summer ever for me. I just graduated high school, and come the fall, I was going to start work with a construction company making very good money. A lot of celebration went on that summer, and one particular night after celebrating through a 5th of Jack Daniels, we decided to go spook hunting, as we called it. So with Ouija board in hand, we set off for the witch's house. It seemed at the time the perfect place, and one that we never ventured to before. There was 3 of us, and soon we found ourselves standing at the back door of the shack of a house. On this night, it was quiet all around. No crickets calling, no frogs talking, no dogs barking, and no traffic on the road, which I remember was odd because it was a major state road. It was way too quiet, as they say. With a knife and a crowbar, we managed to break in. The house had been boarded up ever since I could remember. Inside, we used our flashlights to look around. You had to watch where you stepped because, as I found out, the floor had rotted in places. In the living room sat an old coffee table among trash and boxes of things scattered about. We decided to use it to play with the Ouija board. Coincidentally, I will never own another Ouija board, nor will I ever allow another one in my home because of this story. We started off with yes and no questions. Is there anyone in the house with us? The board said yes. Would you like to talk to us? Again, it said yes. Are you okay? The board said no. What happened? It spelled out, killed. Is there anything we can do to help you find peace? The board said yes. What can we do? The board spelled out, die. The silence of that night was broken with the sounds of laughter that seemed to be coming from everywhere. A whisper at first, and it grew louder and louder. Our flashlights were going all around while we were trying to figure out where the laughter was coming from. That's when we started to see the dried blood on the walls. We rushed for the back door, trying to jump over the rotted places and moving as fast as we could. When we got outside, we were faced with an orb floating just in front of us, moving as if to force us back inside. We scrambled and fell over each other trying to get away. We left so fast, we forgot the Ouija board, which was fine by me at the time. The orb chased us to the edge of the road, then vanished. We stood there on the side of the road as if we were playing hide and seek, and we made it to base and nothing could get us, looking at the old shack. The laughter turned into screams so loud, it must have woke someone up, and they called the cops. The walls of that shack were shaking, and we could hear things breaking inside. I could swear I saw something moving around inside. When the police came, you could still hear the screaming. They asked what was going on, and naturally we lied. We were walking by and we could hear it too. We were scared to go up there to see what was happening. That was our story for the night. The policeman walked up to the house and knocked on the door. The screams stopped suddenly, and the silence fell over everything again. Nobody answered the policeman, so they kicked the door in. We watched as the cop walked in, and we could see his flashlight shine inside. The dried blood in the walls was gone. He came back out and walked up to us, still standing on the side of the road.
I find out this is some kind of prank. All of you are going to be in a lot of trouble.
We just looked at each other in shock, not knowing what to say.
I know you have all been drinking, and I can take you in right now for being underage. I suggest you go home and don't let me catch you out of here again.
The policeman left, and so did we. In shock after what had just happened, we all felt that the night was done for us, and it was time to call it quits. My house was just a couple of blocks down the street, so it wasn't very long before I was home. I think all of us sobered up real quick. Nonetheless, when we got home, I fell asleep pretty quick. The next morning started off normal. Other than the headache from Uncle Jack, it was starting off like nothing had happened. Until one of the guys called to me. "Hey, did you get the Ouija board?" "No," I replied. "I think we left it." "Man, don't try to be funny," he said back to me like he was getting mad. What the hell? Nobody had the Ouija board when the cop came last night, so I know we left it in the house. By now, I was wondering what was going on. Then how the hell did it find its way back to my house? It was sitting on the back porch, in the swing. Those woods hide many a dark secret. Some you don't want to know. To the teenagers that burned the house down a couple of years ago, I don't know what happened when you went in there, but I hope reading this, you know you aren't the only one that had something happen. I hope what you did ended whatever supernatural thing was in there. But that house may have been a container holding it in, and what you did may have freed it instead. I hope not. Time will tell.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,